So you may have seen my post on Reddit about the Unity card renderer that I built using Shader Graph. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate it. As you can see, I've already got my universal render pipeline project set up. Now's the time to get a warm drink, get cozy, and let's go ahead and create a shader PBR graph right here. And I'm just going to call this card shader. So this is the very first part of this, and we are going to use Shader Graph to essentially handle the rendering of the card border and the rendering of the card art. So we're going to need a couple things first. I'm just going to go ahead and create a resources folder. And I'm going to bring in some things I have in an existing project. So that would be these right here. These are going to be our card borders. I've brought over a few, so we've got a few different arts that we can preview. And so that you can see how this shader can be used but modified for different borders, I'm going to go ahead and bring in this template I have here also. But if you're bringing in your own template, I'm going to recommend that instead of letting it size it like this for you and having to tweak that through the shader, I'm going to recommend that you first open this in Photoshop. You're going to want to unlock your layer here. Just going to resize this down a little bit because we are actually going to decrease the size. Then canvas size 512 by 512. We will proceed, and then I'll just go ahead and center this back up now. And with that centered up, I'll go ahead and save it again. You'll see if we come here, we've got a card border that matches the other ones. But we're going to work with these first, since these are the ones that I know. The theory behind this is that this shader is going to be applied to any quad, and applying it to this quad will essentially turn that quad into a shader. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to two-sided and click that. Very important that you do this, otherwise when this is rendered on a quad you'll only be able to see one side of it. The first thing you do is you come and you create node. We're going to start with a sample texture 2D, and this is just going to get us started here with our card frame. So this is going to be for the front of the card. I'm going to make a property for a texture 2D. This is going to be the card border, and this is going to be something we can change through material property blocks in code later if we'd like. But for now, I'm going to set the default texture to one of our textures that we imported. Okay, that's great. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and link up our alpha channel, and then we want to link our RGBA4 directly into albedo. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this to a quad preview, and you can see, voila, we have a card. Well, part of a card anyway. We don't have any card art, and as you can see, we're rendering the same thing on the other side. And one of these things is actually very easy to change, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to render a different texture on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and make a card back property up here. I'm going to go ahead and select my shader card back right here. And similar pattern, we're going to sample the texture 2D. And now what we're going to want to do is disconnect everything from here and here. We'll drag our input out a little bit, and what we want to do is we want to create a branch. But we're going to create this branch like this, and our predicate is actually going to be something built in. This node is the isFrontFace node. So basically this is going to return true if we're looking at the front face and return false if we're looking at the back face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the RGBA4 from the front card texture here into the true branch, and the RGBA4 from the back texture will go into the false branch, and then we'll just go ahead and output that directly to the albedo. If you see that we just try and take our output from our branch and drag that into alpha, you'll see it doesn't really work the way we want it to, and that's because by now we've basically discarded the alpha channel in favor of combining with everything else. So we're going to disconnect this node, and we're actually just going to go ahead and copy these nodes, paste them in again, because we're going to have a separate branch for the alpha channel here, so we can make sure that's accurate. So, is front face false, the alpha channel of the back texture. True will pass in the alpha texture of the sample texture, and you can see how that shapes it up really nice. We'll take this and output it into our alpha. You can see in our preview now, if we're looking at the front of the card, we see the front, and on the back, we see the back of the card. Okay, so from here on out, we've got a direct path to things we can do to the front face before it's passed through our branch, and we've got things we can do to our back face before it's passed through our branch. So the back face we're not going to do too much with. It pretty much just needs to cover up the card so you don't see the front. But the front face is going to get a little interesting because we're going to incorporate card art now into it. And we're going to do this to the shader so we don't have to worry about cropping in an image over a transparent area through UI or trying to do that at runtime or build it in advance. We're just going to go ahead and do it in the shader. Create a node, and this node is going to be another sample texture 2D node. We're going to go ahead and make another property, texture 2D. This is going to be card art now. I'm just going to choose to test with the Dark Magician. Unlike the other ones, we're actually going to be adjusting the UV of the texture because we want it scaled and cropped to match the pink area on here. And this, because right now, if we just try to combine these together with a blend, just to show you what can go wrong, if we just tried to blend these together, you see they are directly on top of each other. So what we want to do is we want to come to our UV node and drag out so we can create a tiling and offset node. And that's how we're going to adjust placement of our card on top of the frame. So these we're going to link up to properties later, but until that happens and we've got a good baseline, I want to leave them as adjustments in here. So as you can see, adjusting the offset does that, which is really cool for animating side to side. Same with the Y. And adjusting the tiling is going to kind of give us what we're looking for because we want to punch in Dark Magician a little bit one way and a little bit the other way simultaneously. We want to try and recenter him up with the card art. And I like having it on this blend output because it's pretty easy to see when you're getting centered. But of course it's a balancing act, and that's why you want to make sure all your card borders are the same, and that's why most card games card borders are all the same. Alright, so once you're satisfied with that crop, at least what you can see of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to change the sampler state. I'm going to set this to clamp so that we don't have any repeat textures. And there you go, that just stretches the last UV coordinates out in any given direction. So now we've got our card art sample here, and as you can see, if we just try to blend that still, we're still getting all that garbage from the UV stretching here. So we'll take care of that now. Luckily, ShaderGraph once again has a lovely node built in called the rectangle node. And this rectangle is almost perfect, believe it or not. Okay, so the trick to this is not to use a blend at all, actually. The trick is to lerp between the card border and the card art based on the alpha of this box. Drag this into our A parameter of our lerp so that our card frame is first, and we want to lerp to the Dark Magician based on the alpha output of the rectangle. And boom, you can see that cropped pretty much perfectly. We've got some more tweaking to do. You can go ahead and attach a tiling and offset node to the rectangle too if you need to move it X and Y for any reason. But I see some pink still, so I want to go ahead and increase my width and height just by a little bit until I don't see any pink anymore. And you might have to go ahead and play with the tiling and offset a little bit, but I think that's just about perfect. So as you can see, our front card is now rendering card art over it, just with a few simple nodes. So we've got our front card texture, which is going into a lerp, the first parameter of the lerp, and our second parameter of the lerp is our card art, which has already been tiled and offset over here to adjust for size accordingly, which is then masked off with this rectangle over here. So now we've got our output that we can go ahead and drag into the true branch here. As you can see, our card is rendered here. We've still got some imperfections we need to tweak around the border because I can see pink area, but that's okay. And if I flip this over, you can see because we're using our front-facing logic to render a totally separate image when you're looking at the back face, you can see it looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. And if I wanted to go ahead and change the art, that is as simple as changing it from a property in the shader. So let's go ahead and show how you can apply this to a material in Unity. So coming back to my empty scene here, I'm just going to go ahead and create a material. We are going to call this our Yu-Gi-Oh card material. And I'm going to change my shader up here to shader graphs, card shader. So that looks good and all, but let's get it on an actual object and show just how this works. So if I place a quad here, it's a pretty good looking quad. Now let me go ahead and apply this material to this quad, just like this. You can see how it changes to look very nice here. So if I just rotate around the card, you can see looking at the back side, we don't see the front of the card at all. And looking at the front side, we don't see the back of the card at all. Everything looks really good, really crisp. If I come in here and go to game mode, that's a good looking card. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to make a simple card shader in Unity. If you liked this video, then be sure to subscribe so you can check out the next one, where I talk about hooking up code to a database for your cards, and the future video in which I show you how to apply other post-processing effects to your card, such as a holographic effect, a fire effect, and more. The good thing about the card being rendered through a shader like this is that it's really easy to apply those after. Until next time, guys, I'll see ya.